Howdy everybody. I pray this video finds you blessed. This week I have a Magnolia roughed out bowl that I roughed out several years ago. Prior to moving, we had gotten several trees brought to us, and Magnolia, we had a ton of Magnolia, cherry, and some other stuff, and I roughed out a ton of blanks and thought, man, this will be years before I turn these, and little did I know that would go by so fast, and here I would be turning them. So I have to apologize. After flipping this around and getting put on my chuck, I totally forgot to push the record button. So prior to mounting it, I noticed there were a few cracks, and I knew I was going to have to fill them or cut them away, and I didn't want to shorten the bowl any more than what I had to. So I decided just to put some medium CA glue in there and rub some shavings in it. Just rub some dirt on it. Well, not really dirt. Well, I guess you could use dirt. But anyways, so now I'm just shear scraping and getting the final shape. Shear scraping helps get rid of any kind of tear out that you may have gotten from either, cutting the wrong direction or just cutting rough or with a dull tool. I've noticed I get a lot of that with dull tools. And depending on how the grain is in the bowl is what direction you will need to do your final cut or your final shear scrape. So the grain needs to be supported in order to get a nice cut. If it's not supported, then it will just kind of like break off. I guess that's the best way I can say it. It's like taking straws and going towards the open ends of them versus going down the side of the straw and cutting down into, say, the tip of it. I'd have to do some sort of illustration for you to understand. I'm a visual person, so being able to see that illustrated is a lot easier for me to understand it than talking about it. So that's why I don't like trying to do a whole lot of instructive turning, because I'm a visual and it's hard for me to do these visuals without having to deep dive into these specific areas. And I don't necessarily have a whole lot of time for that, or I don't really feel that I'm quite qualified to get that technical. And I don't like being technical. I just like being visual. I learn by watching, and that's how I teach, I guess. At least I do for my kids. So the same goes for cutting the inside of the bowl. If you're just roughing, trying to get a rough shape, either direction is fine. You can test it out by, when you are cutting, go one direction. So go from the rim down into the center, stop the lathe, take a look at it, see how that grain is responding, see where you're getting tear out, where you're not getting tear out. It will give you a good idea. If you examine what it is that you're doing and how the wood is responding, it will teach you what exactly why you do what you do and why others may do what they do. It's kind of, sometimes I notice it's unspoken in a lot of videos, and I know it's probably a lot of unspoken in mine as well, but I'll try to share with you these things that I've learned and that I do as I go. And they may not be 100% correct. They may not be what everybody does. It's just my experience. So take it with a grain of salt and do your own experimenting, but do it safely. I was kind of hoping that a few more wormholes would open up, just so I didn't have this one little golden spot in my bowl. And it's fine. It's fine that it's there. If I were to cut away any more, I would have just gotten deeper into that hole. I noticed where the entry mark was, and I would just have to take a good inch off of the bowl in order to remove it, to not have it. So I opted to just put in some 4-minute epoxy with some gold mica powders. Magnolia's grain kind of reminds me like layered plywood, but in a bigger scale. You'll see when it's all finished how that kind of the lines in it, kind of how it reminds you of that. And I didn't want anything kind of taken away from just the simplicity of the wood and the prettiness of the wood. So I was gonna do shavings in there with 4-minute epoxy, but then I just didn't want it to look like it was trying to make it look like the wood, and it's not. You know, that's always the scare, like, all right, do you make it noticeable and stand out, or do you just, you know, try not to make it stand out? After you remove all the meat from the inside of the bowl, it makes it more flexible. And so trying to shear scrape or cut the outside after that, it's just going to leave you with these like wavy lines. It's nothing that you're doing wrong if you get those two as far as cutting. It's just the wood is flexing now because it no longer has that support inside. And I was just trying to shear scrape away some of the resin without having to like sand it, and I ended up having to just sand it away anyway, which I should have known better. But again, you know, I'm remembering things as I go and just learning from my mistakes again. I don't recall while I was making the bowl why I decided to use sanding sealer. Um, I'm assuming it's probably just because I had some in there that needs to be used up that's been mixed, and it's quite old. It's been since the last time I turned prior to the move, so it's been in there a while. It still worked out. I didn't find anything gooky or icky about it. It's just shellac and denatured alcohol. It's 50-50 mix. I was going to use Frenchie's polish on this, which is just a different ratio mixture of the OB Shine Juice recipe. I find the Frenchie's works best for me in how I apply it, but it's the same stuff, just different ratio than OB Shine Juice. Anyways, I was going to use that on here, but then I had already put my DIY abrasive paste on there to cut back the sanding sealer, and I noticed that once you use the abrasive paste, if you use Frenchies afterwards, you will get streaks because you're reheating back up that beeswax, and it will cause these weird lines in the work. So I don't like to use anything with wax in it if I'm going to use Frenchies or OB. It seems like it puts ridges or the shine doesn't isn't the same consistently throughout the piece. So just be aware of that if you're going to use Frenchies or OB Shine Juice. If you put any kind of abrasive paste or whatever on there, you're going to possibly get those lines. At least for me, it always does, and I can never avoid it. So I just don't use any abrasive paste prior to using Frenchies or OB. I'm sure you've noticed the time on my watch. Every time I turn, it's usually late at night, and sometimes even later than what's on there. I have limited shop time, and I take what I can get. And if I have to turn all night long, then I shall do it. With the DIY polish, the wood absorbs it in really good, which is exactly what you want. And so several times after putting the first initial coat, I will coat the piece after it's done, and especially before I ship it out or mail it. I don't want it to be too greasy, but I also don't want the wood to get, I want it to absorb as much as it can possibly absorb. This magnolia is so pretty. It has slight spalting in some areas, and there's weird spots that look like someone dumped bleach on it. It is so cool. And then, of course, the little gold resin in there, just this little wormhole covering. And I'm going to show you the hankiest way on how I burn the bottoms of my pieces with my laser. This is a Artur Laser Master 2 Pro. It has this neat little metal rod. It took me forever to figure out what that was there for. That you use to focus. You just stick that on top of your piece, lower the laser head straight down to it. And there's my dog Rocky. He found himself a dragonfly. They get inside the shop and they just don't know how to get out. Anyways, I center my find the center of my bowl on the bottom. Now you can do this not right underneath your laser. I just set up my camera and didn't feel like moving it, so I'm kind of doing it a little in a tight area. I'm using chalk because it's just easier to wipe away, and it's cheap. So I'm just finding the center of it, and then I will show you in the laser GBRL how I set it up in here. So I go to File, I open up my file, I already have a PNG saved of my logo that I did in Photoshop, and one bit dithering or line-to-line tracing. I haven't noticed a big difference in either of those when I'm doing just this logo. Now, if something's more sophisticated, I'm not sure if there'll be a big difference, but just for my logo on the bottom of pieces, I haven't noticed a difference. Since I am going to do a larger logo on the bottom of this bowl, I decided to do 12 lines per millimeter. I click Next, and then that's whenever this screen pops up, and I just go into this like garbage can squishy hamburger looking thing, and I click it, I pick my laser, which this is the only one that shows up in the menu, so that's the one I choose, and I go to solid wood and engraving. It's 80% power, 3000 speed, and just one pass. I push apply, and then I make sure my size. I go over to my size and I measure the longest part of my logo and where I want that to fit within my piece. This is all in millimeters, so you measure in millimeters and just keep that ratio locked so that way you don't mess up your logo. And then I'm not hooked up to my laser here showing you my screen, but then down at the very bottom you'll see all these logo things here. The one with the dot in the middle will center, so you push that to center so you know exactly where your laser is centering at. I haven't figured out how to get mine to home it wherever I want to home it. Every time I try to do that, it doesn't work, so I just figure out where the laser is going to be in the center. I move my piece to where that light is. Then I push the it's the frame button, so that way you know exactly where it is going to laser. I'm just drawing chalk so you guys can see that, because I wasn't sure if you could see that. I drew a little chalk line where that laser would be, and then I push play, and there it goes. I think this took 7 minutes. Normally it's like 3 to 5 if they're smaller. This was 65 millimeters long, so it was a pretty good size. And there it is. I go over to my workbench and use my abrasive paste just to get off the soot. Some people use painter's tape to prevent that from happening, but it's just an extra cost, and it's no big deal to get this off. Now, certain pieces you might have to do that. Just keep that in mind. And then finish it like I normally would. And there it is. Like, again, putting some more DIY paste on there. Well, that is that. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Magnolia is such a beautiful wood. I am going to research though, why that? What's going on there? Is it lack of tannins? Was a branch going to grow out of there? I don't know. That's very interesting, that bleach spot. And this isn't the only, I've had another Magnolia bowl that I turned that had these spots in it, and so far it's only with Magnolia that I know of. If you guys know of any woods that look like someone just dumped some bleach on it like that, put it in the comments below. It'd be interesting. I want to research why that happens. What's going on there? Maybe one of these days I'll do a video on it. Anywho, the burning on the bottom, it's quite large, I guess. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it, but I wanted to do it big so you guys can see it, because I wasn't sure how that was going to turn out, videoing, showing you how I burn products. So I was like, well, I'll just make it large so it can be, you know, seen, I guess. Not that you wouldn't be able to see it, but smaller. I don't know what I was thinking. I was just trying to be helpful. And I overdo it sometimes in that department. It is 4.5 inches, no, 4.25 tall. The base is 4.5 inches, so where it would sit. And it is 9.5 diameter. I had these measurements written down, and anyways, for visual, for people who are visual like me, who need to see it being used or what it can hold, things like that, here's some bananas. And it fits a rack of bananas. And these are pretty large bananas. But anyways, I don't think there's much else to say about it. Yeah, I hope you liked the video. And I'm sorry about not turning on the camera when recording roughing out the outside, but you know, this stuff happens, unfortunately. But anyways, I pray you all have a wonderful rest of the week, wonderful weekend.
Take care and God bless.